Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I'm Doug Cannon.
On this week's show, we work our way through the second wave of NHL free agency and examine why Nashville could be on the way up again.
And we'll also bring you the latest PK Subban news. That's if there is any. Incroyable.
All that, and my desperate plea for a summer hockey league. Let's drop the puck on episode 46. Well, here we are, Doug. Do you remember how to do this show? It's been a few weeks.
It's been a while, but I got a couple cups of coffee in me. I'm good to go.
Oh, great. I wanted to do the show
Really,
yesterday.
let's go. What are we waiting for? Come on, let's go.
Do a 3-hour show in 20 minutes with you. I wanted to do it yesterday after you had been to the dentist just so you could do it on Novocaine.
2+ hours in the dentist chair. No.
And maybe a little laughing gas.
Like I told you, probably would have been pretty funny if I didn't talk like that.
Would have been fantastic. Do the show with a mouthful of marbles.
Yes.
How's your summer going? It has literally been 3 weeks since the last show. Now, to be fair, there hasn't been a ton of hockey news, but it's picking back up again.
Since the last show, it's gotten hotter.
That's a good point.
It was 115 yesterday.
Yeah, I took the odd turn from my normal daily activities and decided to go hiking on Wednesday, and it was 117.
I saw your tweet on it. It was brilliant.
That was a mistake.
Great thing. Let's go hike Camelback Mountain. Forgot to look at the temperature. It's 101, and it's only 8 a.m.
Yeah, well, for the people that don't live in the Phoenix area, all you need to know is Camelback Mountain is a mountain that goes up, which means you get closer to the sun.
Right.
As it gets hotter. But it was either that or watch more baseball and cry myself to sleep at night wishing it was hockey season. So I just decided to hike towards the sun.
Healthier for you.
Yeah, probably. I have a question for you.
Okay, shoot.
A pretty brilliant idea before we get into the show and some various other things. Well, first of all, who's your number 46? Because it is episode 46.
Oh,
you forgot.
We're going to do the number game first?
When have we ever not
you
done
had some
number?
nugget you were going to dish out.
I'm going to slide that back.
Okay.
I want to catch you off guard.
I have 3 number
That's
46s.
impressive, because I could think of one in the history of the league.
And I am going to go with an active player.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm going with him. It's David Krejci.
Might be the only time we've ever agreed. All through.
Is that who you got? It's Krejci?
Yeah, that's not even close. You know what's funny is anytime you get to a number and you're like, there's not really anybody that stands out at this number, there's always an active Boston Bruin at that number.
Well, and a very good Boston Bruin.
Yeah. No, they're always, Bergeron.
69 points last year.
Tuukka Rask. Yeah, it's always guys, all the Bruins are numbered between like 38 and 48.
I also had Roman Polak.
Yeah, okay.
He's still an active player.
That's true.
And then I'm going to butcher his name.
Oh, I know.
Because you laugh at me when I have to do European
This is a good
names.
one. This is the most European name of all.
Andre Kostitsyn.
Yeah, okay, you did it. But Krejci's the best.
I think David Krejci deserves the honor of number 46.
So, and what an honor it is.
And it's the only number and the only team he's ever been with.
Well, look at that little nugget of Boston sports knowledge. Before we get into free agency, and obviously we did the show a couple weeks ago with the big names.
Well, there goes my coffee.
There's been a few other. Well, that was like your 9th cup, so I think you'll be okay. We'll get into that, and we'll look at some news and notes later in the show. But I want to pose this to you.
Uh-oh.
Because Prospect Camp went on a couple weeks ago, and those were pretty good. Those were pretty much
actually, some of them are only just winding up last week.
Very enjoyable if you live in an NHL city to go watch some Prospect hockey in the middle of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
But you know how the NBA does their summer league? Mm-hmm. Where they have I know it's a little different for the NBA because they only have to have 12, 15 players on their roster, so they fill it out with rookies and second-year players or whatever, and a lot of the teams play in Vegas, and this year it got the highest ratings ever because they actually put like a playoff in place, and it's still short. It's still only 7 games. Why doesn't the NHL do that? I would watch that.
Well, it's coming up in September, and I've been a strong proponent of this forever and ever.
Okay.
Is the rookie tournaments. Traverse City's coming up.
Okay.
And then there's the one where there's like 4 teams that involve the Maple Leafs. I'm drawing a blank.
But they're not every team.
But it totals 12 out of 30 teams are involved in some kind of a rookie tournament.
I want more.
The biggest one is the Traverse City because it's Detroit, Minnesota, Dallas.
That might be the one Pittsburgh's in.
St. Louis is in that. Pittsburgh's in that. There's 8 teams in that one.
Okay.
So that's a pretty big tournament. We actually, us guys on the West Coast, we used to have one. There used to be one with the Coyotes, the Ducks, the Kings. And in fact, before it stopped, they were trying to put in place some kind of rotation where it would go from, okay, let's hold it in Anaheim. Then next year we'll hold it in L.A., and then next year we'll hold it in Colorado. Actually, I think the Colorado is in the Traverse City one, and then let's hold it in Phoenix. But I think it's a brilliant idea.
It almost makes too much sense. I wonder why we're not. I get that you can't have all 32 in the same thing. That's not the point. But you could have 3 little 10-team tournaments or something, and you play.
Well, I think if you had regional,
group,
just have 3 regional tournaments and block it out so that, I mean, I would go watch.
Who doesn't go watch that? Like, that's your first chance to see Sam Bennett and Aaron Ekblad and all these guys, but also your chance to see Jonathan Drouin, who didn't play last year for Tampa. I would assume he's going to make the team this year. But it's your chance to see all your prospects coming up. But it's not like you're just going and watching your AHL affiliate, because that's not the same thing. These are all your younger prospects put together on one team for 2 weeks.
Well, it's funny, because I had this very conversation with a coworker because he's an NBA fan. He likes to watch NBA, and it's interesting that you use the NBA as your lead-in. There's so many levels here because he had it on the TV in the background while he was working because he's a big NBA guy and he wants to watch his team and then watch his team's younger players.
Yeah. Even I watched a little bit of it, and I'm not an NBA guy.
So think about programming content for the NHL Network.
It kills at least 2 birds with one stone.
So now,
really 9.
Now the NHL Network doesn't have to be rerunning games from this prior season or struggling to find interviews and stuff to put on or a recap or a scoreboard type show. And I'm not talking about Rogers or CBC or NBC. I'm talking about the NHL Network. You've got an NHL Network in place. Produce some original content, and a rookie tournament in 3 different cities or 3 different regions would be beautiful content for that network during the off season.
Yeah, and you don't. It doesn't have to be the greatest production thing ever. You don't have to have Dave Strader or Mike Emmerich doing the call or anything. It's for hockey fans. If it's on and you have 2 guys that barely speak English calling the game, I'm going to watch it, and it's filmed on a phone. I'm still going to watch it.
Right.
So you have that on. It just, I don't know. It seems like...
I'll take it one step further. So you just mentioned the prospect camps ending.
Yes.
So I would try to have crews in each of the cities that have prospect camps and get as much footage as I can, and then I put some packages together leading up to the regional tournaments.
Yeah.
Then you broadcast the regional tournaments, and I'm telling you, there's even guys that would listen to it on Sirius XM radio.
Oh, for sure.
I know I would.
Well, it's certainly any team in Canada. I mean, if they had rookies that they were excited about, they're going to be checking it out. Think of all the people that went to prospect camp. I mean, here in Phoenix, prospect camp was full every single day, and that's just to watch guys run drills.
Philadelphia, the Wells Fargo Center, had over 17,000 people just for the draft to see these young guys get drafted. You don't think they want to watch them?
Now, yeah, exactly. And now imagine at the end of prospect camp, you select 23 of those guys, and they're going to go play in a little tournament for a week and a half.
It'd be awesome, and it'd be a great experience for the players on the back end of it, too.
I think we just solved pretty much all the world's problems.
There we go.
And that wasn't even what we were going to talk about.
No, it wasn't.
What is killing 2 birds with one stone? Was that like a problem back in the day, and that became a saying? Like, were people just chucking stones at birds?
Yeah, but you had to have that skill guy that could bonk it off of one bird's head and hit the other head.
The original skill guy?
Bonk, bonk.
That guy got a long...
The ricochet, right? The original ricochet. That knuckle dragon Neanderthal. Hey, I got 2 birds.
See? If they had prospect tournaments to watch, they wouldn't have been doing that. So there's been a decent number of kind of the second wave of free agents signed since the last show we did.
Yeah, I don't want to use the term cherry picking, but they're kind of like guys are just being plucked a couple of weeks at a time.
Yeah.
We're also in the middle of arbitration.
Yeah.
So guys are having deals done prior to going to arbitration, which I think is always best if there's – because you got a guy on your roster that won in arbitration is like, I don't want you in my room.
Or vice versa.
Right.
If he lost in arbitration, he's like, fine, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd rather see these teams sort it out of court, I guess, is the best way to put it, than in court.
Well, Toronto has a couple goalies again. You got James Reimer back. That's got to be exciting for you.
Yeah. Who's the other one?
Jonathan Bernier. Same situation you had last year.
Thank you. You just took the words right out of my mouth. I'm like, oh yeah, I got the same 2 I had last year. How good did that go?
Well, I don't know that it went great for you, but
so
I was
sidebar.
All right. This whole show has been a sidebar. Sidebar to your sidebar.
Brendan Shanahan made a big, bold move this past week in signing an assistant general manager.
All right.
His name is Kyle DeBoss.
Okay.
All right. He's 28 years old.
Who's the boss?
Who's the boss,
okay.
Right? Wow, what did I think
I
about?
don't know. I need to stop
28 years
old.
With you. I think, it's great to see a nice youth movement coming into the front office. I think it's great. Will it work? Time will tell on a situation like that. Will he bring to the table that they thought or think he's going to bring to the table?
Big stats guy, right? Big advanced stats guy?
Analytics, big into analytics. My best. When we're not supposed to do this, right? We don't read the comments.
I told you not to read the comments.
But I read the comments.
Okay.
And one of the comments on the day that Kyle was signed, the guy goes, "This is great. Love it." I'm paraphrasing. "This is great. Love it. Youth movement into the front office should be great for the team, but the roster's still the same."
Well,
that kind of goes to
true.
Doug. You have 2 goalies in Toronto. Yeah, they were there last year.
Same 2 goalies. Well, and I mean, look, this guy may be an advanced stats guy, but he's also young enough to still play if they ever need.
Well, I'm happy for James Reimer. I mean, it's settled. It was settled out of arbitration. Him and the team came to an agreement. They got a 2-year deal. So at least we have a happy player, and we have a happy team. So now we just move on from there.
You drank a lot of coffee.
Yes, I did.
Morning. You're just flying through this.
Ryan O'Reilly.
I can't even get the words out of my mouth. Ryan O'Reilly has
Here, I'll talk for you and you talk for me.
Well, okay.
Okay.
I'll make comments about Frank Zappa and 1970s Toronto hockey. Ryan O'Reilly does re-sign with the Avalanche. I made the comment on this last show that talking to some of the Avalanche players at the awards show in Vegas last month, you got the sense that they kind of realize they have a really good thing going there. They have a lot of good young talent. They've got Patrick Waugh, who's young in terms of a coach, and they just kind of seem to everything seems to be clicking. But the one guy that kind of wasn't was Ryan O'Reilly. Not that he wasn't clicking on the ice, but it seems like there's been a contract dispute between him and the front office for like 3 years now.
I don't understand that.
And they get him signed for 2 years, and immediately you see some of the reports that come out of how much does this really solve? In 2 years, we're going to have the same issue, or maybe they're going to trade him next year, whatever. But then you see Joe Sakic come out and say all this animosity and this perceived rift between us is all because of the media, which may or may not be true.
Yeah, I don't know how big this rift or imaginary rift is because he just got a 2-year, $12 million deal. He had 64 points and 2 penalty minutes last year.
It's a good ratio.
So I'm like, how can you not want this guy on your roster? And let me tell you, if Colorado hadn't signed O'Reilly,
there was 29 other teams.
Anaheim probably would have signed him.
That's true. He would have gone to Anaheim, St. Louis, Dallas, or Nashville because that's where every player goes now. You look at a player like that, if there is a rift, it was bigger last year. And look at you just read off his numbers.
I don't understand. What's the rift?
32 points for every penalty minute. I'll take
I could put up with a rift if I'm going to get that point.
Yeah.
Maybe
he plays better with a rift.
Yeah. Well, and then some real quick signings over the last few weeks. Danny Heatley going to Anaheim.
Yeah.
1 year, $1 million.
This is where you get.
What do you think of that?
Guys, well, for 1 year, $1 million, there's no risk. Danny Heatley's best
50-goal scorer.
He was a 50-goal scorer. He's not that now, but
still in the hands, man. Still there.
That's true. I mean, hockey players play for a while. They play late. If he's terrible, big deal.
Right.
You spend $1 million, which in the grand scheme of things in the NHL is nothing. And
do you think he's going to be terrible when coach goes, "Hey, Danny, I want you out there with Ryan and Corey on the power play"?
I think you could put my dog out there with Ryan and Corey on the power play, and he would at least pick up some arbitrary points just from being out there.
Thank you.
So certainly secondary assists are in Danny Heatley's future.
Oh, yes. And then another one, David Booth.
Yeah, David Booth, you're higher on him than I am, but it's tough for that guy because his career's just been derailed by injuries. He definitely showed some promise before.
Yeah, but if you look at his numbers as a healthy player, and right now he's healthy,
yeah,
he can produce. He can produce 20-plus goals a year. I think he's a solid winger to have on a third line, fourth line.
Especially for what you're paying him. Like, again, it just goes back. It's the same thing with Danny Heatley. There's no risk.
There's no risk.
Derek Roy's another one.
So Booth goes back to his to Toronto, and again, if he's hungry enough to prove that, hey, look, I got wasted away in Vancouver because he didn't get any ice time in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Look, you got a good deal. Re-sign me for a couple more years.
This is the time of the summer where you get guys that are cheaper than they expected to be, and thus more motivated than normal.
And a guy that you and I both know just got picked up by the Rangers for $900,000 a season.
Yeah, he was good for Pittsburgh.
And he was good for the Coyotes when he was in Phoenix, now Arizona.
Good for Calgary, too, when he was there.
And he was good for Calgary. I mean, he's a good player. And we're talking about Lee Stepniak.
I thought we were going to go the whole segment without actually saying his name. But yeah, $900,000 again. The Rangers lost some players. They obviously bought out Brad Richards. You don't expect Lee Stepniak to come in and get you 40 goals and 40 assists. Players like that just don't shift teams in the offseason unless you're Pittsburgh giving James Neal away for no reason. But you bring in a guy like that if he gets you 20 goals and 25 assists, that's nice.
I'd be happy if he got me like 14 or 12 goals and 30 assists because Lee can set up plays. And there's some guys on that roster, Rick Nash, that needs to start scoring. And if he's got a guy like Lee skating with him, maybe he's going to have a few more apples and goals, but then he's setting up the star players that need to produce.
I know you're a big Rick Nash fan, too,
so
yes.
I'm
glad you're able to bring that up. Oh, just look at a team like the Rangers. It's a good example. You bring in Lee Stepniak, you're not building your team in July. Like, you're just not. No. But you're filling in holes.
Yes.
So the Rangers have Rick Nash, who they're assuming is going to get back to Rick Nash form at some point. They've got Chris Kreider. They've got Matt Zuccarello. They've got Derek Stepan. They've got all these guys. Lee Stepniak is secondary scoring.
Yes.
For very cheap.
That's very, very cheap.
The Rangers aren't going to win the Stanley Cup. I'm not saying that. But adding these guys at the right time are how you make long playoff runs. That and good goaltending.
And New York has that.
But I want to go back to Derek Roy because he joins Nashville, and it seems like everybody is joining Nashville very cheaply right now. That's a team I'm a little worried about in the Western Conference if you are a fan of another Western Conference team. Not that I think they're coming out of the West, but look at how close they were last season.
What do you like about Roy?
Roy specifically, he had a few good seasons. He may be nothing, but he sounds extra motivated, which is a characteristic you're going to get with a lot of these guys. He's had success in the past. He's still got the hands, like you said, and you're paying him nothing.
Who was their other pickup with Roy?
Well, they added Ribeiro,
which
is, whatever. But, there's still upside there. But more than anything with Nashville, I'm looking at the fact that they played last season without their goalie.
Yeah, that's huge. We've talked about it many, many times. Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting they picked up James Neal, too, not to open a wound.
I already mentioned it on the show, so you couldn't. Yeah, that's just 40 goals you've just added.
Yes.
So any playmaker you put around him, and they don't have Mike Fisher because of the injury. It's not like a powerful lineup, but they also added Olli Jokinen. They just went out and got a lot of role players, but the biggest thing for them is your defense of Shea Weber, Roman Josi, Seth Jones, and your goaltender of Pekka Rinne. And the fact that they were close last year, even though Jones was just a rookie, they had no scoring and Rinne wasn't playing. Now they have more scoring. Jones is in his second year and Rinne's back.
And the X factor, I think, for Nashville this year, and we'll talk about it later in the summer as we get close to our previews.
I'm not sure I want to do whatever those are.
The X factor for me is a new coach.
Yeah, but a good coach.
So there's going to be just such fresh energy in that room because things are going to be different. You don't have Trotz coming back and we're doing it Barry's way again. Everything's going to be new. Everything's going to be fresh. We're going to take a fresh approach, and this is how we're going to go. And you mentioned the other factors, but I think that's the X factor is that they got a new head coach, and he's going to take a different approach.
Do you think that will affect Pekka Rinne's numbers? Because you and I were talking off the air. We're eventually going to do a fantasy hockey preview show, too, when we get closer to the season. And one of the top goalies is Pekka Rinne, but they're going to play a more offensive style than they have been for his entire career.
But they have solid blue line.
They do. So that's why I don't know if it'll affect him.
I don't think it'll hurt his numbers at all.
It's funny, you look at Nashville and they get Peter Laviolette, and all of a sudden they're adding more weapons up front. And then you look at Washington, they get Barry Trotz, and they're filling out the blue line. Like, you can tell they're trying to fit their coaching style.
As long as you've got two-way forwards, your back end's fine, right? If they're all just going to be offensive-minded, then you got a problem.
Yeah, and it's not to say that Rene was just a product of that system either. I mean, that's a good goaltender, and he's huge.
Yes. Let's hope he stays healthy.
You're listening to The Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
All right, segment 2. Doug, as you can tell by the length of segment 1, we had some hockey we wanted to talk about.
Apparently. Holy cow.
I rolled in here this morning. I'm like, this show's going to be like 9 minutes, and we're already 20 minutes in.
Yeah, well, that coffee, man, it didn't seem like 19 minutes.
No, maybe not to you. We did touch on the fact that we're going to do the fantasy preview before we get to the season. We're also coming up. I mean, it's almost August.
Tease. He's teasing.
Yes, I'm teasing here in segment 2. We did the divisional previews last year. Those were award-winning.
Absolutely. They're going to be even better this year.
They are going to be even better. And look, we can start doing those in about 3 weeks, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
what we're going to do, break it down by division or by conference?
I think we got to do division. Because when we were to the division ones last year, each division was taking us like an hour. If we do a conference, we'll be here for a day.
Okay.
So anyway, that's coming up, and more than anything.
Second tease of the segment.
Well, and now I'm going to tease the third one. That just means we're not that far from hockey season. Like, training camp's open in
very exciting.
Less than 2 months.
Actually, I step on the ice in 2 weeks.
You're playing this year?
No, I'm a sub this year, so because I'm too busy between...
In the NHL?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm subbing for Arizona.
Oh, that was a very quick transition for you.
But in my men's league, I'm subbing because I can't guarantee I'm going to be there for every game.
Well, because most leagues play on the weekends.
But my boys start practicing in like 12 days.
It's right around the corner.
Yes.
Once we get out of July, I'm telling you, July is the 1 month where there's really not a whole lot of hockey, but now there's free agency.
And then I'll be at the rink like 6 days a week. And
oh, so you took a step back this year.
And then I'll be told, you don't do anything around the house.
Well, who would say that?
And I'm like, well, I'm at the rink.
That's my real house.
That's my house.
That's the comeback you should use. I'm sure that'll go over really well.
Yeah. I'll win a lot of points with that one.
Oh, yeah. Brad Richards made the comment. Of course, he signed with Chicago for $2.2 million.
Which I thought was a brilliant pickup.
Let me see if I can find...
Brilliant pickup.
You okay over there?
Yeah.
We're going to have to cut off your coffee. I don't have the exact quote from him, but he
paraphrasing.
He was saying,
air quotes.
If not for the salary cap, half the league would want to play for the Chicago Blackhawks. So it got me thinking. I mean, I guess in a way that's true. If that were the case, this would just be the NBA where guys just team up and pick like 7 teams they want to play on. And basically you could condense the NBA down to about 10 teams right now because all the guys go to the same few teams.
So let's analyze that statement. What is he saying? Is he saying hockey shouldn't have a salary cap?
No.
Or Chicago's the best place to play?
I think he's just saying that Chicago is a destination for players right now. But he does.
Oh, there. Let's go to the winning team.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's
easy.
It. Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. He did touch on, though, and I thought this was interesting, which is why I wanted the exact quote, but it's pretty long. But he obviously he's coming from New York, and he talks about how great it is to play in New York because the fans are so passionate about their team, and it's New
until
York
they
City.
don't sign you.
Well, he didn't mention that. I had to read between the lines. But he talks about how hockey's such a big deal in Chicago too. And how maybe it's an even bigger deal in the middle of July than maybe it is in New York because there's so much stuff going on there. And it got me thinking.
Did he make this comment around the Blackhawks convention that they do every summer?
Possibly. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Because it's one of the best marketing tools I've seen any NHL club do. They have a convention. It's the Chicago Blackhawks convention, and all the fans come down. It's a big ballroom. It's like any other big convention,
yeah.
And it's all Blackhawk-centric, and there's a lot of whoopla, and the players all come out. So I'm wondering, seeing thousands of people come out in the middle of summer is what prodded him into making that comment.
Well, whether he said that there or not, that certainly seems to influence his comments because he even says, like, we're in July, and the Blackhawks are a huge topic of conversation. And so that got me thinking. I went back and looked at the attendance numbers back in 2001. Remember the Blackhawks were pulling in 14,000 a game.
Yeah.
Like, people just forget that. And this is just a reminder of what winning a Stanley Cup can do for you. They've won 2, obviously.
Correct.
But there's this I'm not trying to rip Blackhawks fans, but there's this perception right now like, oh, the Chicago, they've got the best fans in the game. Well, they had half those fans 10 years ago.
And I think if you want to dig deeper and drill down in your research, you'll find that the Chicago Wolves were selling out back then.
That is true, and that's a good point because Chicago is a great hockey city.
So the fans just left the losing team, went to the winning team because the Wolves were doing very, very well in the AHL back then. And then, of course, a couple of Stanley Cups.
And just even before they were winning the Cups, just a fun team to watch.
Correct.
And there were other things going on with Chicago.
It's a hockey market.
You couldn't watch all the games on TV in Chicago back then, too, so it was different. But it's a reminder, if you ever forget how much winning changes everything, even in the NHL, even at the level of a team like Chicago.
Well, and I also think that, great point about the television coverage, because by televising the games, because before it was only away games, you couldn't watch a home game on TV. By taking that restriction off, you've exposed more hockey fans to your product.
And you've exposed more sports fans to your product, too, which I always think is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, in Chicago, you can't argue the fact that Chicago is one of those big sports cities. Man, the media's all over, whether it's the Cubs, whether it's the Bears, and the fans are just as passionate about their sport, whether it's NBA basketball, NBA football, or baseball. I mean, look at the Cubs.
What's there to look at? Actually, this is going to be
their fans are passionate fans.
Their fans are passionate, and not to go all inside baseball on you, but they have the best prospect system in baseball. Can you imagine a world where the Cubs are good in like 3 years? We're never going to hear the end of it.
True.
Anyway, so that's the comment from Brad Richards. He's excited to be in his new city, and why wouldn't he be? Because now he's on a lineup that's just absolutely loaded.
So where's he going to be in a year when they don't sign him?
Well, that's a whole different question. But
you didn't think of that.
What do you think? Is Chicago the top free agent destination? Like if you just put all the players out there, they were all free agents, and it's like, all right, you just go pick where you want to play. Just go pick. Don't think about money. Don't think about salary cap or anything. Where do you want to play? Is it Chicago?
I'll give you my three.
All right, give me your three.
My three would be Vancouver.
Wow.
Colorado.
Okay. These are if you were a player.
If I was a player.
Okay.
Vancouver, Colorado, Toronto, Montreal.
This is 4 now.
New York.
That's 5.
Okay, there's my top 5.
Okay. That was a very extensive top 3. Well, I didn't do it that way. I was just looking at what teams, like I've said on the show before, why wouldn't you want to go play for LA? They just won the Cup and you can live in LA.
Anaheim seems to be a destination. There's a lot of good players on that roster, and any of the one-on-one interviews I see, like I remember seeing an interview with, not Anaheim, but like Drew Doughty, just loves the Southern California area.
Live on the beach, and then if it gets too hot, you go inside and play ice hockey.
Right.
I mean, we don't have the beach here, but it's the same thing of like a lot of people live in Phoenix, and more keep moving here because it's a nice place to live. And then you can go play hockey where it's nice and cool.
Well, the one thing I will say about the 115 degrees is that everybody's left and there's no traffic.
Don't jinx it. There's always traffic. So, I mean, I'm assuming.
Well, what do you think the number one is?
I don't think there is one. That's my point. I think it changes because Chicago was not that 10 years ago.
Right. So wins is a key.
It's a key. And just having guys, I mean, Jonathan Taves is a great playmaker. Patrick Kane's a good player, too. And those are fun guys, I'm sure, to skate with.
And they're going to be around a long time now.
Yeah, they are.
Another 8 years, anyways.
We'll get to that, but I think the border between the U.S. and Canada is a very clear dividing line for certain players. Like we saw, Jason Spezza didn't want to play in Canada.
Yeah, still haven't figured that one out in my head.
But I do think that there are players that if you want to play in Canada, I think Toronto and Montreal are top of your list.
Got to be.
I think if it's just you want to live in a nice environment, I do think these teams on the West Coast, L.A., Anaheim, Phoenix, maybe even Vancouver, San Jose, are places you'd want to play. And if you're just going by players, then I think Boston, Pittsburgh until this summer. I don't know what the deal is there now.
I don't know if I'd ever want to live in Pittsburgh.
Wow. Shots fired. Play on a line with Crosby and Malkin. I think you would you'd figure out a way to make it
Is there
work.
a nice area anywhere around Pittsburgh?
Yes, there is.
On the other side of the river?
No, there's so many rivers that no matter where you go, you're on the other side of the river.
But aren't there people in the woods in Pennsylvania?
That's Philadelphia.
Oh, it's Philadelphia.
No, actually, it's not. It's like north. Don't worry about North Pennsylvania. That's not what this is about.
The woods have eyes, right?
I think that's a sequel to a movie. So there's a few players that haven't signed. That's what we're transitioning to here in a very long roundabout
way.
Bashing northern Pennsylvania for no reason way. Give me some of these guys.
Deer Hunter, favorite movie.
I never saw it. Sorry. You all right?
I love that movie.
That's what I hear. Martin Brodeur, unsigned.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
It's weird. I'm having a hard time with it.
I'm having a hard time. There's got to be a club out there that could use a quality backup because that's where he is right now. He's a backup.
Okay, but here's my problem with that. If he was just going to be a backup, why not just stay in New Jersey? Like, do you want to see Martin Brodeur backing up? I don't even know who really needs a backup. I mean, my first instinct is always Florida, but they got kind of a nice setup with Roberto Luongo and Al Montoya.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to mess with that. And Montoya is a good young goalie. I mean, he's not that old.
I don't want to see Martin Brodeur go out like this. And he wasn't bad last year. I think everybody's just like, well, he's old, he's done. And that might be true, but he wasn't bad last year. He wasn't Martin Brodeur.
I don't think he's done. Do you really think he's done?
I don't think he is done in that he can't play anymore, but he's not on a team. That's concerning.
Yeah.
Does he just show up at a training camp and say, I'm Martin Brodeur, I'm here to try out to be your backup? I mean,
yeah, why wouldn't New Jersey just keep him?
Why wouldn't Winnipeg make him their number one?
True. Very true.
I mean, maybe he doesn't want to play there. I don't know. I don't know all the extenuating circumstances there, but I don't know. It's just weird to see Martin Brodeur not on a team. Give me some other names.
Oh, I got a great one for you.
All right.
Dustin Penner.
Yeah, he bounced around. Was he on two teams last year? He was on Anaheim and Washington?
Started off in Anaheim, finished up in Washington. I just don't understand why a guy, a forward of his caliber, he finished now moving to a new team. He only played 67 games, but he played 49 and had 32 points in 49 games with the Ducks before he got shipped to Washington. Okay. Now late in the season, you're being shipped to another team. That other team's already got a system in place. It's going to be hard to give you ice time to fit you in. So I get why his numbers were probably down, his ice time. I didn't check his ice time, but because he only had a goal and 2 assists in the 18 games he played with Washington.
Washington had no idea what they were doing by the end of last season.
Right.
And to be fair, he had the two extremes. He was skating with Perry and Getzlaf in Anaheim when he was there.
Right, but I mean, you put him on a line with number 8, he can help.
Yeah.
I like Dustin Penner. I think he's a solid player. He's going to give you 20 goals or more a season. And just kind of now, as you said it earlier, we're filling holes now. We're not trying to build a team. We're filling holes. I think he could fill a lot of holes on a lot of teams.
Well, let me throw a couple more. I guess I'll just stick with the guys in their 40s that I don't know if their careers are done or not. Daniel Alfredsson is still floating around.
Yeah, I don't get that either.
Sounds like he wants to play with Detroit, and I don't know if they necessarily have figured out cap room yet. It seems like if Daniel Alfredsson comes back, he's going to play for Detroit. What about Ray Whitney?
Yeah.
He's unsigned.
Mr. Consistent.
I know
you don't get any more. You just look up his numbers. You don't get any more consistent than that, man.
Well, last year he had a down year.
He was injured.
Yeah, he was. And he finished the year with 32 points. But this guy
has a down year.
Well, yeah. But, I mean, that's not what you normally expect.
32 points in how many games?
I'm looking it up. And I looked up Devin Setaguchi before. His player page destroyed my computer. He had 32 points in 69 games last year, so that's not ideal. But I'm going to look at Ray Whitney's numbers the year before that. 29 points in 32 games, and that was a lockout-shortened season. I don't know why I always call it a strike. With Phoenix, 77 points, 57 points. Before that with Carolina, 58, 77, 61, 83. The guy produces points.
Yes, and he's a playmaker.
But he's 42, so our team's just scared off by the fact that he had a down season and he's 42? Because I don't think one down season would scare you off.
Yeah, because he's not a fourth-line grinder or anything like that. He's not suited that. He's maybe a third-line guy at this point. But I still think on a third line he can produce points for you. He's a top 9 forward, I think.
Oh, for sure. With the potential to be a good second-line playmaker. I mean, maybe he has one more good year. That's what you're banking on with Ray Whitney. A one-year deal.
How about a special teams guy?
Yeah, he was very good on the power play when he was here in Arizona, and he was solid in Dallas, too, his first year. So that's one. Michael Del Zotto, that guy has fallen off the face of the earth so quickly.
I don't get it. Daniel Winnick.
Yeah, he had a good year last year with Anaheim.
He had a good year with Anaheim. He's one of those guys that you put on a fourth line or a PK, and he'll go in and he'll do what he's told to do. He understands what his role is as a player, and he's a big body. And I don't know why anybody wouldn't want that.
Yeah, I mean, for what he is. You have to know.
When I say Daniel Winnick, I'm not looking, look, he's not a 40-goal scorer. That's not his role.
For the role you're trying to fill with Daniel Winnick, he's going to get signed.
I hope so.
But this has got to be a scary time for the players when you start to look around and see guys going to Switzerland and going overseas to play.
Okay, so now we have
Coffee's wearing off.
Coffee's slowing down. Every team in the NHL.
Okay. You want me to name them all or what?
No.
Okay.
Does every single team in the NHL have a solid blue line?
No.
So why
I would say like
is
five teams do.
So why is Derek Morris floating around?
I don't have an answer for you. I
do not understand a guy of that caliber not being picked up.
I understand why he's not on Arizona. Because they're one of the 5 teams that has a solid blue line.
Okay, so Arizona aside, he's a solid blue liner. He's a solid veteran. He could bring knowledge to any blue line and help them out. Now, part of it might be Derek might not want to move too far.
He may not want to move too far.
He might be happy where he is in Arizona, and maybe he's happy with his career, but I just think there's a lot of hockey in him, and watching him play, his outlet pass, his positioning in the zone, the guy is so good, and I just don't get it.
When he's on his game, and I know you're a huge Derek Morris fan, when he's on his game, he's just very fundamentally sound.
And nobody notices it because of that.
But he's a good stay-at-home defenseman when he's on his game. He'll be 36 when the season starts. But again, there's players, we're talking about players in their 40s that are still looking for a job. So you're not signing Derek Morris to a 10-year deal and saying, all right, you're the anchor of our blue line. But, I mean, I would be comfortable putting him on a second pairing for a lot of these teams.
And if you had a young blue line and you sign him for a couple of years, he's going to help groom your blue line for down the road.
17 points last year. I mean, that's not why you're bringing him in, but 17 points. Has a pretty solid shot when he catches it. And he usually puts it on goal.
And he's got a cannon for a shot.
And, when he was playing with the Coyotes, he was a good fit with Keith Yandel because you have a guy like Yandel that can run around and do some offensive stuff, and you have a guy like Derek Morris that'll hang back and kind of be the stay-at-home defenseman. I'm just looking up and down the list of NHL teams in my head, which is it's really the only thing in my head. It's just a list of NHL teams. Boston should be confident in their defense. We mentioned the Coyotes. I mean, their strength is definitely the defense. Nashville has really good defense. There's a few other teams, but there are plenty of clubs out there that need a ton of help on the blue line.
Oh, absolutely.
And at this point, Derek Morris has to be the best defensive option, correct?
I think so. That's out there. But, I mean, then, you go up across the border north into Montreal, and there's this guy named Subban.
Well, yeah, but you can't get him.
But he's not signed.
Del Zotto's another good option, too, at just 24.
I mean, he's restricted.
Yeah. And Montreal just signed Lars Eller, 4 years, $14 million. I'm not the GM of the Montreal Canadiens.
Nor am I.
I'm not in charge of their payroll. I'm assuming they're going to get a deal done with PK Subban here at some point. This is a top 5 defenseman in the NHL with the potential to be the top 1 or 2 on any given night.
Well, who's ahead of PK Subban?
I think there's just a group of players. I mean, I think that Chara's still there. I think Weber's there. I think Duncan Keith's there. I think there's a good line of younger players like Erik Karlsson that are coming up. I think Oliver Ekman-Larsson, but I know I see him more than a lot of people do, are on the way up. But Subban's right there. And we saw him in the playoffs. He can be dynamic.
He is dynamic. He brings energy. He brings passion. He brings toughness. He brings points.
This feels like a PSA for PK Subban.
Well, it is. I don't understand. This guy won a Norris Trophy. We've talked about this many times on the show.
Yeah.
And after he wins the Norris, it's like, okay, are we going to sign him? Or are we going to keep him? What are we going to do? I'm like, he was just named the top defenseman in the league. And you're questioning yourself.
You're wondering, yeah. I don't know. Montreal has the cap room. I have to think they're going to get a deal done. But it's just, you let these RFAs hang around for this long without getting them signed, and at what point do you start to get the player to kind of sour on the situation? I don't think Subban's that guy, because as you just mentioned, they really strung him along the summer heading into his Norris Trophy. He's, personality-wise, just a happy guy. So I don't think he's going to be like, oh, they don't want me.
Well, he's very outspoken, too.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to speak his mind.
Very
but,
true.
I mean, we're talking about a defenseman that plays solid defense, plays a physical game, brings passion. You know that he's funny in the room. I've never been in the Canadiens' locker room, but I know he brings energy to that room just because of the type of player he is. And 53 points.
Well, he's their best player. I mean, we don't need to, tiptoe around that. I know Carey Price is important, but if I'm running another team and somebody says, I love these hypothetical scenarios that would never happen. You can have any player you want off Montreal. I'm taking PK Subban.
Right.
And I'm not even looking at the rest of the roster. Sorry, Michael Bournival. I'm going with PK Subban.
Yeah. So there's a few guys that are still lingering around. I don't understand why, but they are. And we'll find out by the end of the summer.
Which isn't that far away.
You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Podcast for even more hockey news. #do it.
Final segment, news and notes. Doug, I'm watching a video from that Blackhawks convention you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And it is a dance-off between Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane.
Oy vey.
And let me just say, these two guys, I'm not questioning their moves on the ice at all. And I'm by no means a professional dancer.
But they shouldn't
aren't
dance
either. And I can't look away, though. I can't stop looking at it. I'm going to have to shut this thing down.
But you can see the crowds.
Yeah. No, I'm not questioning the Blackhawks fan base by any means. But it was smaller 10, 12 years ago.
Yes, it was.
Substantially smaller. Anyway, if I was Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews, I would be dancing right now as well because they are making
a lot of money.
What's the actual... How do they describe this? They're going to be... The contract goes through this upcoming season, but the Blackhawks, this was a couple weeks ago, but it's since last time we did a show, re-upped with both of them. So they're each going to be making $13.8 million for the next 3 years, starting in 2015-16.
Correct.
Overall, they each signed 8-year, $84 million extensions. So they're signed through 2023, which brings up this age-old debate. And I come at this as a admitted Penguins fan. It's getting harder and harder to admit that. But that's a team that tied up a lot of money in Crosby and Malkin.
Right.
Not nearly as much as Chicago just tied up in Kane and Toews. Can you have sustained success when that much money is tied up in two players, even when they're this good? And we had this debate with Anaheim last year when they signed Perry and Getzlaf, too.
And we had that conversation with the Sharks, too.
Yeah, and I guess you could say 2.5 of those 4 teams had success, and I don't know what the Sharks are doing.
But, again, Penguins are struggling on how to reconfigure and fill holes and still be competitive on the ice when you got all that money tied up.
Well, the one thing I'll say about the Penguins...
think about it. Each Kane and Toews, it's a 10.5 hit once that contract kicks in 15-16. It's 10.5 cap hit for each of them. That's $21 million towards the cap, 2 players.
Yeah, and the cap's going to be right around $70 million next year. Does that seem right?
Right. So just about, a third of your cap is taken by 2 players.
You have to draft well or you have to get good bargains. And the thing, I know Ray Shero's not the GM in Pittsburgh anymore, but he was very good at putting a good lineup around Crosby and Malkin for fairly cheap, and part of that was ripping off Dallas to get James Neal, and part of that was having guys like Pascal Dupuis develop playing alongside Crosby, which Chicago will have guys developing alongside Toews. They'll get better. With sports, all you can really do is put your team in a position to have a chance to win in the playoffs. Pittsburgh has had that chance. They've struggled in goal. Anaheim has had that chance. They were very close this year. San Jose is kind of a different case. Chicago's won 2 cups recently. I mean, you had to sign these guys, but it's just going to be interesting going forward.
But that's a lot of money for a long, long time. And whenever I see contracts like this, and I've talked about it when Parise and Suter were signed in Minnesota, I always go back to a guy by the name of Pat Gillick. Pat Gillick was a general manager for the Toronto Blue Jays, Baltimore Orioles, Seattle Mariners, and Philadelphia Phillies. He won 3 World Series as a GM in baseball. His philosophy was no long-term contracts.
Okay.
And whether it was a 3-year or a 5-year, his philosophy was, I only get performance out of the first year and out of the last year. The years in between, there's complacency because there's no motivation to try to be better.
Okay.
And then that ideology was built on the fact that whenever he took over a team, the first thing he did was he built his minor league system. So he would sign a player to a 1-year deal for the money the player was asking. So I'm player X and I want $5 million a year. Here, there you go, 1-year deal.
It's a good GM.
Okay.
I'd love to play for that GM.
There's your thought. I gave you what you asked for.
Now deliver.
Now deliver. If you want to play here next year, you're going to have to perform. If you perform and you choose to play somewhere else, that's okay because I'm going to bring somebody up from my system to plug into your hole.
So I agree with that philosophy for the most part. Do you think there's anything lost in the transition from baseball to hockey?
No, because I think the players that have those huge millions of dollars in front of them, and I've got 8 years, and I know for 8 years I'm going to make 13, 10, 12 until it lowers to 6 at the final year. That money's mine.
But I completely agree with what you're saying.
I have no reason in the first year of that contract to perform because I know I'm going to get that money the second year of that contract.
But you want the Stanley Cup, though. That's the thing. The example that we're looking at, Jonathan Toews strikes me as one of the most motivated players in sports, really. So the only hole in that argument is every player isn't the same. So I would say that theory of, for the most part, you're getting a guy's best performance in his first year after he just got the contract, and certainly we see it time and time again in that final year when they're up for their next contract, is I think that applies to about 90% of the players out there, not 100.
The other part of the discussion, though, is that I've signed him for 8 years. He's going to get older as he goes along.
No, that's true.
So as he goes along, he's going to get older. I'm still paying him a ton of money. He's more injury prone because he's older, and his output could diminish. I'm not saying it will, but it could. It most likely will.
I would even go one step further and say even if Kane and Toews continue to do what they've been doing for the whole length of these contracts, that's just a lot of money to have tied up in 2 players. You've got to fill out a whole roster.
Again, it's over a third of your cap is tied up in 2 guys. It doesn't give you a lot of movement and creativity to do things with your roster.
There's very little margin for error. I mean, there's a lot of talk now that maybe they can't keep Patrick Sharp next year, or they've got to let Marian Hossa go, or they got to let one of those guys go once these contracts kick in, or
Saad.
I mean, yeah, there's even talk this year that they're going to have to move somebody just because they were already close to the cap. Now you've got those 2 guys tied up. It puts a lot of pressure on them, which they've shown they can handle. But when you're talking about the Blackhawks, we're not talking about, well, yeah, this is a successful deal because they're in the playoffs each year. That's a team that wants to win the cup.
Chicago's over the cap.
Yeah, exactly.
So now they're into a luxury tax situation.
They're already going to have to make a move this year, but it's not going to necessarily be a big one. But when you get to next year and you have Kane and Toews each receiving over $4 million more than they were this year, so that's another $8.5 million. Yeah, you're probably going to lose Sharp or Hossa or somebody like that, or you're going to have to get creative. You're counting on guys like Brad Richards coming in and taking maybe less money to play for you, which may happen, as we talked about in the last segment. I mean, that is a destination for free agents. You're also counting on guys like Teuvo Teravainen and your prospects to pan out.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of money tied up in Marian Hossa, too, so.
Maybe not for long. And, yeah, he's signed for ever.
2021? So or was it longer?
That's 3 guys that are signed long-term. And Hossa's not making a ton, but I don't know that he can still make $5.3 million for the next 7 years or whatever it pans out to be, with Kane and Toews making that much.
It really clearly puts a restriction. And the thing I always go back to the Gillick was whether you agree with it or not, he always left himself room to maneuver.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of outs here.
Right. You've got yourself, it's that guy that starts in one corner of the room and he paints the floor, and
yeah, and then he's just
he painted
there.
Away from the door, and he's got to wait for it to dry. Yeah. Mr. Bowman's in that corner right now waiting for the paint to dry so he can walk out the front door.
And, I mean, the other thing is you can never plan for this, but what if Patrick Kane misses 40 games one of these years?
Which is, I mean, I think any sport, injuries are always that evil thing that looms, but
right now, looking at this roster, if Patrick Kane had to miss the playoffs next season,
that would not be good.
It would not be good, but the Blackhawks still have Taves and Sharp and Hossa.
And they have
Saad
Richards this year.
Yeah, and Richards. A couple years down the line, they're not going to have that luxury, but you have to go back to the very simple question of, if you're Chicago, can you let Kane or Taves go? You can't. You have to re-sign them.
Yeah, that's true.
So really quickly to the draft, since we were kind of talking about the importance of hitting on your picks, especially if you're a team like Chicago, and if you're going to have money tied up in 2 or 3 big players, you have to hit on your prospects, which they've been able to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you're telling me now the draft might change?
No, I saw an article by Dennis Amo, and he wrote that, how about changing the draft from the NHL to the AHL with a focus on development?
So this was his suggestion? This is like an opinion piece?
It's like an opinion piece.
Okay. Because I think there's some merit to that, but I also think it will never happen. Because I'm guessing the thought is, if you're drafting from the AHL level, you're drafting with the immediate thought of development in mind, as opposed to, can this guy help my NHL team right now?
Yeah, his thought comes from Trotz's big push now in Washington, is he wants to help develop the AHL and ECHL affiliates of the Capitals.
Okay.
Going back to the Pat Gillick theorem of, if I have a stable of guys, if I need to fill a hole, I can call one up and I can fill a hole. So off of that, what if the draft was in the hands of the AHL with development as the key motivation of drafting players?
I think, though, that you can still draft the way it is and just put more focus individually as teams on development of players.
But I think that, to me, that's already in place.
Yeah.
Because when I draft, other than a handful of first-round draft picks, maybe the top 10 guys each year, out of those top 10, maybe 5 make a roster. Most GMs going into the draft know that if I draft Bobby Smith isn't going to see my club for at least 3 years, because I have to let him go back to his junior club, his D1 school, or whatever, and watch him
baseball.
And watch him develop. Yeah, I mean, you're drafted in high school in baseball, right? And then you develop and hit the minor leagues.
Yeah, NBA and NFL are completely different, where you're drafting guys to help you right away, whereas the NHL, look, you and I have the bet that, what was the bet? Out of the top 4 picks this year, I said 3 of them will play this season. You said 1. Not real encouraged, because I heard an interview with the Calgary front office. Did you hear this too?
No.
Where they seem to indicate that they have no interest in rushing Sam Bennett to the NHL, and that was one of the guys I was counting on playing this year.
But again, do you want to ruin a guy like Sam Bennett and put him in a situation where his maturity is not there as a player? His maturity might be there as a young man, but is his maturity there as a player? You don't want to rush guys. And, and a good example of that was Kyle Turris.
Yeah.
Kyle Turris got rushed, I thought, as a young player, and now he's coming into his own a few years down the road in Ottawa.
Yeah.
He needed that maturation as a player. He should have finished his time at Wisconsin and then come to the club.
There's a lot of players like that, but again, this kind of goes back to the old rule of, there isn't really a clear-cut rule that you can just put across all players, because I would counter that with Nathan McKinnon, who just blew everybody's doors off last year and was 18.
And hopefully Colorado's pleased, no sophomore slump.
Yeah, and I just watching him play closely, that guy seems pretty immune to a sophomore slump.
Yeah, but I mean, look, this year we'll probably get to see a guy like Max Domi play. Mm-hmm. We'll probably get to see a guy like Duran play.
Yeah.
Right? But they went back.
Yeah.
And, some of the quotes I saw from Max Domi, you can tell he's hungry. You could tell that year back in juniors has motivated him even further, and he's a heck of a player.
I saw him at prospect camp 2 weeks ago out here for the Coyotes, and he looked very good at prospect camp last year when he had just been drafted. But the difference was, and we'll have to see how this plays out, but the difference was last year it was like watching a man among boys against all these other prospects. But then he went to training camp last year, so he's got that experience. And this year at prospect camp, he looked like he was playing a different game.
Hence why they do what they do.
Yeah. I mean, that's on your coach and your GM to make that.
So I don't see the NHL relinquishing control of their draft.
No. That's it for episode 46. Join us next time as we inch closer to putting together some previews for the 2014-15 season.
And we, THP fans, will put Luke's feet to the fire on putting together a fantasy hockey show where we will compile all the necessary data that you, the hockey fan, need to put together the winning team in your office hockey pool.
That sounds like a lot of extra work for me, plus whatever other news breaks around the world of hockey. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.